Okay, welcome everyone to the April 2024 Southall Matters Community Forum. My name's Sufi. I'll be chairing this meeting alongside my colleague Angela Fonzo from Cleaner for Southall and Hayes. I believe we've got a guest speaker today. So we'll hand over to Angela to introduce her and then we'll get started with the meeting.
Right, I'm just going to admit somebody. So welcome to Simmone Ahiaku. And I met Simmone probably about a couple of years ago at a race and health event on the climate crisis. And I was really blown away by what you had to say, along with the other speakers who I started following on social media. And I've been thinking for some time, I thought I'd love to have you on a call. And I think even more so when I read your essay on gentrification. But just to introduce you, Simmone is a campaigner, facilitator, and organiser who has contributed to environmental, social, and cultural work in Bristol, London, and across the UK. Simmone has worked on air pollution, divestment, and climate justice campaigns, previously working at the National Union of Students on liberation campaigns. Simmone worked on anti-prevent, reproductive justice, decolonisation, and sexual violence campaigns. Simmone is currently an organiser at the London Renters Union. Yeah, so I'm totally blown away by your biography. And when I read about the London Renters Union, I'm actually a leaseholder. And if I had spare time, I would be campaigning on leasehold issues. It's a massive discussion at the moment, particularly with the cost of living and people experiencing serious hikes to their service charge and rent. But obviously the focus is on gentrification, with the spotlight on Southall. So I would ask everybody to show courtesy and respect to Simmone. And if I deem that anybody is behaving inappropriately, you will be removed from this meeting. So we've never had sort of like a firm structure and agenda. We just kind of like go with the flow. But I think if you don't mind, can I ask you what is meant by gentrification?
Of course. Firstly, hello everyone. Thank you so much for that beautiful intro. I hope we're all doing well this evening. But for me, like gentrification is essentially like the displacement of working class people, of any background, but working class people from inner city parts of London/London into other areas of either London, the outskirts, or the rest of England as a result of like either middle class or above, or like private businesses buying the land and essentially buying out the working class locals that lived there before.
Yeah, do you think it's an issue that is being addressed by the mayoral candidates or the assembly member candidates?
Not necessarily. I think like one of the huge things that is like a blocker to gentrification in particular is like rent controls, because like so many, for a lot of us who are like working class, we're less likely to own our home. So it means that like we are kind of victim to the rent rises of our landlords, you know, and like for the council, thankfully there are regulations around it, even though the rent increase is still a lot, but it's like it can't increase any more than 8%. Whereas with private landlords, it they don't have that kind of regulation. So it means that they can increase it by 13%, 22%. And what that means is that like once they increase the rent and you are no longer able to afford it, you actually have to leave. And I think like the government especially haven't necessarily put any regulations on landlords, particularly private landlords, to keep rents down. So it means that they are able to evict tenants by these rent rises. And that's how they're able to like essentially change the areas, because they push everybody out. I think like ultimately, I don't think the government has done a lot on housing or a lot on like preserving communities by like anti-gentrification tactics, because I think like, yeah, they have done nothing to address the lack of homelessness in the city. They've done nothing to address the like rent rises of landlords. They've done nothing to address the loss of like schools and youth centers as a result of like this rent rise. I think like there are a lot of parents that are, a lot of schools are also closing down as a result of these young people being forced out of these areas and their families. So schools no longer have the children or the resources to stay open. So it's like there are so many things that the government isn't necessarily addressing about this. And ultimately, like when you gear a society or a city, specifically London, around like profiteering and making money, they will prioritize the people and businesses that are able to do that. So whether that is a singular private landlord or it is a business that's like a developer that's willing to buy all of the land and build all of these flats, that's what they'll do. And it's like, as well as that, you know, the government talks about building affordable homes, but oftentimes in these new developments, it's only a small percentage. And oftentimes the affordability actually isn't very affordable. So it means regardless of if they redevelop an area, I put in quotation marks, it only like a small percentage of who lived there before can actually afford to be there. And they, you know, they offer things like shared ownership or some sort of ownership that isn't affordable for a lot of people. So yeah, I think like they prioritize these landlords and developers because they bring money into the system, and like our housing system at the moment is geared towards profits over people. Like housing should never be a commodity for people to profit off of. It's something that everybody needs. Everyone deserves a good, safe home, but that is not where we're at. And the government is not aiding that changing.
Yeah, it's quite a depressing picture that you're painting. And I have two teenage girls, and I don't think they're going to be able to afford to buy a property in Southall because the price increase is astronomical. I think you need about 400,000 for a one-bedroom flat. And, you know, really, it's like glorified renting. You know, your leasehold, you know, it's not a great situation. I'm quite depressed looking at my local area. We have the Elizabeth line running through Southall. So that was like the big driver for development. You know, we had a group of largely white middle-class consultants and developers making decisions and determining what Southall should become. So I just did a quick brainstorm. So we've got some big developments around the station, Park Avenue, the gasworks, and you might have seen my tweets. That Barclay Group submitted another planning application in October last year to more than increase the number of homes from 3,750 to 8,100 by building taller towers. So we don't know the result of that planning application yet. Somebody said actually they made a decision a long time ago. That's what they were going to do. We've got Punjabi Bank. That's another big, not big, but modest-sized development. The Arches, which were quite sort of like historical. Don't know if they were listed, but people tried to fight to save them. They were demolished, so that's another housing site. Merrick Road, though there are completed developments there. And I open my front door, look to the left, and I can see the towers in the distance. Just makes me feel a bit down, really. Southall Market, which had a lot of history, you know, behind it. That is now a high-rise tower development. Southall Community College, again, it was a well-known college in the past for aeronautical engineering. Half of that was sold and is now housing. So you're talking about developments in a very confined space. You know, in my view, it's over-crammed, over-congested. And our chair talks about people being moved down from, he said, Croydon, Liverpool, Manchester. You know, so in our view, it's not addressing Ealing Council's housing waiting list.
And if I just come in here quickly on that, about moving. So I work for NHS, as Angela knows. So I'm a healthcare assistant in the Northwest. I primarily work in a clinic in New Southall, UB1. Clinic is 13 years old. Our population is now just touching 10,000 patients. Out of those 10,000 patients, when I last did the audit, I think it was 4,500 patients have been registered in the last 2 years. Out of those 4,500 patients, how long have they been in Southall? Less than 6 to 12 months. Now,
Wow.
I actually had a registration come through about 2 weeks ago where the patient had moved from Manchester, where they're living is on the new developments. And I just, obviously, we have to, are you new to the country is the first question we have to ask somebody when they register with us, or do you have an NHS number? When you look at their NHS number, you realize that it's an NHS number. Obviously, NHS numbers don't have a particular demographic, but
Yeah.
you look at where they were previously registered, Manchester. And I just had a quick word with them. I said, how come you've moved to Southall? I'm in social housing. And I just thought to myself, okay, so myself, talking about myself here now, I'm looking for a property of my own. I'm 22 years old. I've applied through the council. And the answer I get is, I don't meet the criteria. I said, okay, what is the criteria? Because your criteria is anybody who comes off a plane, lands at Heathrow Airport, goes to Ealing Council, gets a house. And I'm not even just saying that, I've got evidence in front of me to show them. And like, I'm married, so I've got a wife, so I've got a dependent on me. And privately renting, there are not many private properties. And if they are, they're touching £1,700 for a 1-bed self-contained property in Southall, which I don't think any 22-year-old can afford that, even on the salary I am on. With the other side hustles I do, as Angela knows, I do entertainment, I do consultancy, I do other bits and pieces. And even then, I can't touch I think it's 55,000 pound household income they require for a private rental property in Southall. Now, in my head, I'm thinking, how do you expect people to rent privately when there are tens of thousands of properties going up? Because as you said, Ange, 8,000 properties on the Green Quarter, that's just one development. I can list 5 developments now which have happened in the last 10 years. The Green Quarter, Park Avenue, South, the new builds, Uncle builds they're called Uncle, by Southall Police Station, the old Southall Police Station. You've got the new builds being built up on Golflinks Estate where my mum lives. You've got the new builds on Havelock Estate, or what they call now Southall Village, Ange, is it called Southall Village?
Yeah, well, that's quite an interesting case because that redevelopment, I spoke to somebody who lives there, and he said not all the original tenants were able to move back. You know, they couldn't afford to move back.
Yeah, exactly, and that's the thing. All these properties are going up, and it's what you say, that people want to just, the council are doing so much for housing, and this ain't to be political, but they've got housing targets. They get money from central government. They get money from City Hall if they hit their targets, and that's what Councillor Mason's openly said. But we get paid to house people, and we know if they house people from outside their borough, they get a bit more money. And as we say in Southall, we say in this group, money talks, and mind my language, but bullshit walks.
What's quite interesting with Berkeley Group, they have obtained 125 million loan from the government, and they've also obtained money from the GLA. I don't know what form the funding takes. That'll be subject to an FOIA request. And, you know, it just is shocking, you know, a company that as a private company can borrow public money. And, you know, this sort of plays to what Simone said about only a really small percentage are affordable. And actually, are they really affordable?
But what the thing,
you know, in Southall, we're seeing that these properties are being marketed. I'm sure, Simone, you'll say it's right across London, but to East Asia, and Singapore, you know, and it's not meeting the needs of the local community.
Affordable housing, that is a very vague and very obscure name, affordable housing. But what is deemed affordable? People can't even afford shopping. So they're telling me what a house costs less than 40 quid for shopping. Do you know what I mean? What is affordable? Who deems that affordable? Because if you've got the upper class middleman, the white is even like I not to sound any other way, but if the white man in office is saying, yeah, this is affordable, you're sitting on a £250,000 salary, how can you say it's affordable for you, but for a person from the BAME community who's only on, say, average salary, let's say £45,000 in London, let's just say,
Yeah.
45,000.
Do you know what it is in Southall? It's probably about 19 to 20,000.
Yeah, it should be. I think the average salary is like 30, 33. It's either 30 or 33 grand.
All right,
45
sorry,
is
it's even,
even
I've just
considered a lot.
overestimated that.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
a lot of money.
Yeah, no, so all right, so £33,000, there you are, and then you've got 220k difference. So
Exactly.
what is affordable to that person? Reasonable. Like these upper class middle white men who want to work in central government or even in our council who are sitting on, I think it's £100,000 the chief executive officer of Ealing Council makes, and he's sitting on 100 grand a year, whereas we're struggling to hit 10% of his salary. He earns what we earn in a year, in a month, put it that way. So how are you telling me that that's affordable? Because last time I checked, my grandfather, I talk about him quite a bit. My grandfather's house was valued at £250,000 10 years ago. It's now worth well over £1 million. That is
Oh, wow.
That is down to Crossrail coming into. That's down to he's done work to the house, obviously, but that's nothing to do with it. It's all down to how this area has been whitewashed and greenwashed rather. It's been
Both.
Yeah, and it's just been, oh yeah, and like there was a marketing video by Berkeley, which funny enough got taken down. Remember that marketing video, Ange, where they showed Southall as this white town? If you look at the AI, the AI video was totally white people. And I just looked at it because I've done graphic design and I know how to edit on Premiere Pro Max. And I'm like, you can add color to those faces. But I watched that video about 25 times and I saw one slightly orange person. I say orange because that was the color they used. And they took out the central Gurdwara of a Southall. And they just put flats there. And I'm just like, the Gurdwara is not flat. There's a Gurdwara there. That's a place of worship. And it's quite disrespectful. Questioned because I said we questioned Ealing Council, we questioned Berkeley Group on this. That video within 6 months was taken down and it cannot be found. But that just shows you how sneaky and cunning they are. They want to.
Well, it's all part of the marketing, is it? It's not,
and because these people in the Far East who are investors, they're not going to research the area. Yes, they will to an extent, but there's an investment opportunity. Okay, £250,000 for a 10 times increase in the next 5 years. Who isn't going to take that? Me, I look at investments all the time, and I'm like, yeah, if I'm going to make 5 times my return in 5 years, I'm going to make my return back in a year, but I'm going to make 5 times in the next 5 years. So go and do it without research. And when they come to Southall, they get picked up in a black van, tinted out windows. They get driven round the site, and they don't see real Southall. They don't see the traffic.
Can we bring Simmone in? Because I think that's quite an important point. Because when I go on the gasworks site, it feels like it's sort of sanitized, clinical.
It's a different
doesn't reflect the cultural diversity of the area. They're selling pizzas, in an area where we have so many different Indian, curry restaurants and, so much more, diverse, not pizzas. So obviously, I just think they want to kind of like remove as many of the identifying signatures of Southall. But Simmone, from your perspective, what is happening in Southall? Is it a familiar story for you?
Like, so familiar. It's so upsetting to hear how progressed the gentrification is in Southall. I think for a lot of us, I'm from Brixton, so inner city London, for a lot of us, we know what gentrification looks like because oftentimes that's where it's shown to be. But for Southall to be so far west in London, outskirts London, and for it to be facing that is so awful. And of course, it's because of the the Crossrail being there and the Elizabeth line is becoming a lot more accessible to the city. So it's like, why the heck, why not gentrify this place? But I think it's sad. I think like what is so sad about gentrification is that like the formula is always the same. Like there's never, the minute you start seeing all of these pizza stores and you start seeing a different kind of artisan coffee store and you start seeing getting decanted out of their estate houses, and then you see one developer and then the rest of them follow, and you see these high-rise glass houses. Like it's, you go to Brixton has the same, you go to Elephant and Castle where they've like fully kind of completed. I feel like Elephant and Castle was such a good example of gentrification being completed in its fullness. Like now Elephant and Castle is like dead, it's super sterile. The kind of Elephant and Castle used to have both a large Latin community and a large Black community, and it's like for both of them, a lot of them have been wiped out of the area essentially. A lot of them have had to move to other parts of Southwark. And it's devastating to see like so many community signifiers, a lot of family restaurants, a lot of like youth centers, a lot of parks, a lot of homes, a lot of estates be cleared away just for the sake of like these new high-rise buildings. And I think like, yeah, especially talking about like the kind of community signifiers of an area. Like I do know Southall is quite there's a large demographic of like Asian people or South Asian people.
That's right.
And I guess similar, so like Brixton, for example, has a large population of like Black people, particularly like Black Afro-Caribbean people. And it's like to kind of see, you know, restaurants, and particularly they're not able to keep their spaces anymore. So as these house prices rise, a lot of the rent on like other corporate businesses or other corporate spaces rise as well. So it means that like these restaurants that have been there for years can no longer afford the kind of like rent on their places. So unfortunately, they have to close down. Similar with like other family-run shops and businesses, they have to close down. And sometimes even like religious centers, sometimes like other kind of communal spaces that people used to access have to close down as a result of this rising of rent everywhere. And it's like, with the rising of rent, it kind of sets a precedent that you can rise the rent even more. So it's like, if one landlord in an area is charging £500 when it used to be 300, for example, that is like not what, those are not the prices we see anymore. But like, if one landlord can come and say this place is now worth 500 on the market, it means that other landlords, it gives permission to them to be like, oh, actually, I want to raise my rent to 500. And then 500 will then be the base level, only for a new landlord to be like, actually, let's raise it to 700. And then it keeps going up. It never actually comes down. But like to kind of go back to what you're saying about like it mirroring what else is happening in London, absolutely yes. Like it's the kind of loss of community, the loss of affordable housing, the loss of spaces to like convene, the spaces to eat as well. And like, you know, losing your neighbors, losing the people that you've known. Like there's so many people across London who have actually grown up in the same communities for generations. Like Sufi mentioned his grandfather living in Southall, and I'm assuming may have been either the first generation or the second generation to live there. And so many people across London have lived in these same pockets for decades.
I did a report back in October last year called Sacrifice Zones, a lived experience. If you remember this, Angie, in collaboration with Centric Club. I remember I came to London for the when I was living in the Midlands for about 6 months, but I came back for a meeting. So I'll actually, if you drop me or if Angela's got your email, I'll drop you the report. It's a 33-page email. Sorry, a report. But just have a skim through it because it's an interesting report, and I'll just read you a bit out which we came. So we came up with 7 demands in essence. So one of them being we demand health justice for those who experience polluted air. Now, we shouldn't have to demand clean air. Like that's a basic human right. It's like how stupid, like it's just stupid. The thing, not stupid in the sense we're saying it and we're being idiots, but it's like how much clearer do we have to be to these people in power? Like we're saying, can we please have clean air? Like, isn't that a basic human right? Do you know what I mean? It's like it's quite sad, I would say. That's something you would have to say it's like, oh, you can have some food. It's a basic human right, you know what I mean? So it comes down to that. So that was just one. And then we've got we've got others. I've not looked at this report in a minute, so just give me 1 second. Let me just find it.
Yeah.
No
Can I just
worries.
come in whilst you're perusing? I
Yeah.
mean, obviously there are other people on the call. You are very welcome to ask anybody questions, Simone, myself, or Sufi. You might want to type something in the chat box, but feel free if you want to contribute. You know, we
Feel
hope that
free.
we're not deterring you by taking control. We're not.
Yeah.
You know,
So-
it's your meeting as well. And there was something I wanted to say about sort of the gentrification, and it's all because of the Crossrail. But there are problems with the Elizabeth line, and I don't use it very often. But there have been times, there have been delays, cancellations. I've seen people traveling towards Heathrow, quite a few of them with their suitcases affected by, you know, the delays. Somebody told me the other day they returned from work, I guess in central London. It took about 10 minutes to go from the platform to the exit of the station. And I can see probably at some stage in the future, the station, when it becomes too crowded, will close, you know, in terms of, you know, managing platform safety. You know, so it's only as good as, I mean, and I think in terms of regeneration, is it really regenerating the area? I mean, I see people, and I walk along a road near the station to the Green Quarters development, and they're carrying their high-end shopping bags. So they've either been to Westfield or to the West End. You know, we do campaigning on the site, and we see the lobbies of these high rises stuffed with boxes on the floor, and also, you know, Sainsbury's food deliveries turning up. And I know it's a generalization, I haven't got any statistics to back it up, but I think unless the newcomers are in the social housing, but if they're in the private housing, they're not spending their money on the Broadway, which is a real kind of eclectic mix of shops, or King Street, which is very similar. So, and you talked about sort of rents going up, business rents, etc. You know, the local businesses, I doubt, are really benefiting from, you know, newcomers who I don't think are really participating. If you look at the site, it's just, you know, it could be anywhere. It could be Dulwich, it could be Manchester, literally anywhere in the country except Southall.
Yeah, it doesn't reflect the demographic. But yeah, just coming back onto the report, like one of the other rights is stupid. Like even writing this, when I wrote this report, I just looked at and I just had to even think about, does this even sound sane to say to somebody? But we demand the right to exist. Like
It's a lot.
how much more do you need to sort of plead to the authorities to say, stop killing us because we have the right to be alive? We pay, you know what I mean?
Literally.
It was like, but I'll send you the full report, and then have a read of it. Because a lot of the people who contribute to this report, who Angela knows, that Araceli Camargo, Josh Artis, and the rest of Centric and other campaigners, but we compiled a 33-page report. There is something in the chat, and shall I read it, or do you want to read?
Yeah, it's from Sidi. Hello, everyone. I'm curious to know about how Southall and its housing narrative has changed over the years. And how do you interpret the ideal development in the context of Southall and its relationship to other parts of London? Southall has always been a disadvantaged working class area. Where I live in Southall Green, it's the poorest ward in the whole of Ealing Borough. And I'm not ashamed to say I understand the overcrowding situation. You know, I live in a flat with 2 kids. It's very common for people, you know, so they might rent a 1-bedroom flat, but in order to make the rent, there are 4 people in a 1-bedroom flat, 2 in the bedroom and the living room converted into another bedroom at night time. It's also multi-generational. in the Asian community, the elders often live with their children. And generally speaking, residents are now finding it more and more difficult to actually get the extensions that they've put in a planning application for. As you said, the affordable housing that's going up at the moment isn't really benefiting the local community. And where people are renting, they're having to, as I say, rent with friends. And I think the overcrowding is really sort of hidden. I would imagine that the authorities don't have a true idea as to the extent of overcrowding. We've also got exploitative landlords, private landlords, who rent beds in sheds, places which are really unsanitary, don't have planning consent, charges you've talked about, Simone, really expensive, extortionate rates. We have recent migrants who are probably here as students. And what's really common is to see them on public transport, on the bus, moving, I guess, from room to room, because they've got huge suitcases on wheels plus bags. They can't afford an Uber to move from one room to the next. So how do I interpret the idea of development? Southall is the neglected part of Ealing Borough. As Sophie's already mentioned, we are the sacrificial area. We exist for white, wealthy men in particular to make money. And, it's an area where there is struggle, yeah? People work in low-paid jobs. Do you know the site Next Door Neighbours? Yeah, I'm on that particular site. And it's very common for people to say, I need a cleaning job, I need a childminding job, I need a building job. And these are people, to make a judgment, have probably recently arrived in the UK. So there are a lot of hardships. You tend to get very neglected. Can I give another example before we come back in, Sophie? The local rec, I met a council officer last year about refurbishing it. The Moogers, the multi-use games areas, are really run down. The surfaces are all crumbled. You can't see line markings for basketball or football. And he said, I'll go away and do some pricing. I included all the councillors in communications about trying to get this area improved. Well, they announced not that long ago a list of parks identified for refurbishment. Do you think Southall Recreation Ground featured? No. We are the poorest area. We do not matter. Yeah. And the only way I think something would happen, particularly in the run-up to elections, if Ealing Labour felt that there was a threat to their dominance, as what happened in Rochdale. I think it would take that kind of seismic shift, because that's what they care about. They care about retaining power. Yeah. So I know I've gone on for a tangent, but it's all part of the narrative that disadvantaged working class and black and brown people, we really are marginalised. Our voices, I wouldn't say they're not heard, they're heard, but we are ignored. So I don't know if that answers your question, Sidi, but it's an area that I campaign strongly on. Simone, I know we only sort of allocated half an hour, and I know we've gone over, but maybe this will kind of close it. What do you feel communities can do to try and resist gentrification? Is there anything we can do as campaigners?
That's such a good question, and no worries about it going a bit over. I think it's definitely it's a hard fight. I think, like, you know, developers, private businesses, landlords, they have a lot of capital and a lot of backing to make these houses be built. But I think it's possible. I think like um communities can come together to win, and what that looks like is communities working together to like identify like a power holder, whether that's like and I think like councils are very much complicit in this. Like they also, as much as they are given a budget by central government, which, you know, to them it's actually not that much, but like they are given a budget. They're also given the power to allow private businesses to build these homes because they don't have the budget to build the homes themselves. So it looks like whether that's a council or it's a private developer, it's about like identifying who has the power to either build or not build that house. It can be one or the other, it can be both. And it would be about like essentially like building the power of people. And what that looks like is you have to get everyone on board. So that could be like you have to door knock, you have to get people to meetings like this, you have to get people really engaged in like opposing the development. It's like it's not enough for example, there's maybe 6 of us in this chat, maybe 7. It wouldn't be enough for us 7 to be like, don't build this new apartment and shove us all out. It would need to be like a whole ward that is like, we strongly oppose this. We propose the alternative of affordable council housing, for example. And I think that that's one of the most important bits, is building that power among people. Like people have been able to like orchestrate, people have been able to win on these things. Like, for example, like in Brixton, that we have a large landlord called Taylor McWilliams. He actually owns Brixton Market and owns the like Brixton Village, which is also in Brixton Market, and was planning to just knock the majority of it down to build like an office block, which it wouldn't make any sense in Brixton. Brixton is quite far from Southall, so I don't know if you've been there recently, but like it would have been a high-rise block in a market, which is crazy. And like he's a millionaire, multi-millionaire landlord. You wouldn't think that you could take on this multi-millionaire landlord as an everyday person. But the people came together and they opposed it, and they actually won. That building is, the Hondo Tower isn't going to be built as a result
Amazing.
of people in Brixton just coming together and opposing it. And like the Lambeth Council allowed for that planning permission to happen. So they also got a lot of stick for, you know, allowing it in the first place. But that's to say that like it wasn't going to be Lambeth Council that stops that building happening. In fact, they signed it off. So it's like everyday people came together, and what they did was they door knocked the whole of Brixton. They even door knocked my house. They asked people to get involved in whatever way. People released loads of stories. So what you could do is like when you're talking to people on doors, ask people to share their stories of Southall and what it means to be displaced from this area. So like looking at the Hondo Tower campaign, there were loads of videos from children to the elderly to teachers to imams to, you know, local pastors who spoke about like what it means to live in Brixton, what it means to have your family and community here, and what it means for it to be uprooted. And I think that like personable aspect to it is also a reason why people were able to connect with the campaign and be like, actually, it's really wrong that like you are a singular landlord is able to displace thousands, tens of thousands of people in an area. I'd also say that like you know, what else can I say about like opposing these kind of things? I think it's also really important to like do research on these companies, like to understand like some of the other developments in the area. So whilst I'm saying organize locally, because like people from Southall are more likely to organize in their local area, so a lot of these like developments have other developments. Like it might be happening in Southall and the same developer is in Brixton, or the same developer is in Elephant. And oftentimes you can mobilize with some of the other people who are also facing the same developer, and then it becomes even bigger ask for these developers to get out. Imagine organizing with someone in Elephant and Castle who may never have been to Southall and Hayes before, but has the same developer. You guys are connected by the fact that you're going to be displaced by this developer who's going to gentrify the area. So it is about like doing research about where the other properties are, seeing if you can link up with other people. It's also about thinking, like researching like the profit margins of these companies, because like oftentimes they build these houses and they're terrible. Like they're quite, you know, the word IKEA flat pack new builds is very real. You know, you hit a new build and it falls down. You know, I don't know if you saw recently, but there was a balcony of a new rise that literally fell to the floor. And it's like they're built
Shocking.
so badly because like ultimately these private companies are building them to make profit. So they're cutting all of the corners of making like durable, long-standing houses. So it's like you can present those kind of profits to your council to be like, this is the amount of money they're going to spend on these buildings. This is the amount of money they're what's it called? Predicted to make. It's clearly not about providing a service. They're clearly there to make profit. And it's like your people are suffering off the back of these companies making profit over people's needs to live. So you can make that kind of case to the council, as well as like figuring out things like what kind of materials they use. Some of these companies, you know, still use cladding. And as we know, like cladding is certain types of cladding are particularly flammable. So as unfortunately we saw with
So they haven't learned.
a lot of them no, a lot of them haven't learned. They're just putting them up and hoping for the best. So you can put up things like that to kind of research like who they work with, what materials they're using, so that you can essentially have all of this evidence to present and be like, you should not be here. What else would I say? I will also say that like it's important. I think the most important thing for me, especially, is organizing the people, but also it is good to organize enough people to back your local MP into a corner. I think like local MPs, sometimes less often than not, they are very political in the right direction. Like they are MPs for the people. It doesn't often happen. A lot of MPs are careerists.
Yeah, definitely.
Care. They want to look good on paper. They don't necessarily want to do the work. So it's important to build that like people backing so that you can actually be like, there are hundreds and thousands of people in this ward who are opposing this development, this bill. What are you actually doing about it? Like power, Malcolm X says power only concedes in the face of power. Like us coming with 7 people, they're going to be like, whatever. But if you come and it's the majority of your ward that has been mobilized, they will have no choice but to listen to you. Bless you.
And sorry, that's my daughter doing her homework.
That's all good. That is all good. And it's also worth like researching who the power holders are in the council in your area. Like, for example, I work in Lewisham for my actual job. And so like I had to do some research on the councillors of Lewisham, the Lewisham Borough. And like one of our councillors has actually worked in housing before and has worked in like the homeless sector of housing. And particularly, he's only just been elected as a new councillor. So it's very much in that stage of like, he has a lot to prove, if that makes sense. But he's also someone that really wants to advance his career. So what we've tried to do there is like understand that like, he has this housing background. He's been very vocal on housing, but ultimately a lot of people in the Lewisham Borough live with tons of disrepair, tons of high rent. So it's like finding out what your councillor cares about and sticking on them with that. So if it's like, so in Lewisham, we're like, we've seen that you care about providing good, affordable council housing. Why is that not happening? And then presenting the evidence of all of these houses that are filled with disrepair is how we're trying to back him into a corner. So that's a similar thing that can be applied in like in Southall, is understanding what makes your councillors tick and using those ticks against them to get what you want essentially. So that is definitely, I think, how like some of the starting points of getting people together. But honestly, a lot of it is like being on the streets and like
knocking doors, getting to know
people. Because I think like for a lot of people, the housing system is so dire. Like we don't feel like we can fight it. Like rents are going high, people's neighbors are going missing, we're going missing, and it's like it feels like a fight that we can't fight. But so a lot of people, understandably so, they don't necessarily have a lot of hope for it changing. So a lot of the work is telling these people it is entirely possible for this to change. It's whether you're up for fighting with us and up for fighting against these developers and this council that has also allowed these developers to do what they do. And like things have been stopped in the past, they will continue to be stopped. So it's like you can look to all sorts of examples, from like Latin Village in Tottenham to Hondo Tower in Brixton to even Aylesbury Estate in like Walworth, which is South London. They fought off Southwark Council demolishing the building for another like 10 years or so.
Really?
Like, yeah.
Is it going to be retrofitted then?
The campaign itself is pushing for retrofitting because in Southwark Council, they are doing managed decline, which is basically where they're allowing the building to get so terrible that they have to demolish it. And then obviously the new developers will you know, do their new flats. So
Mm.
they have proved that like that is what Southwark Council was doing. So now they've won that campaign and they're pushing for them to be like, the homes and the building are structurally sound. It is just you that is not maintaining this building. Can you do fit this building? So it's like there's so many examples of everyday people from a lot of backgrounds and areas that look like ours, diverse, working class, majority black and brown, who are just coming together and being like, enough is enough. You can't take our homes away from us. You can't push our communities away. You can't raise the rents, and we're not having it. And they work together and push them out. So it's entirely possible, and that is like definitely what I want to leave you guys with. But a lot of it is moving on the streets and making your demands clear of the power holders.
Thank you, Simmone, for sharing your expertise. It's really appreciated, especially hearing about, the rejection of the Honda Tower in Brixton. And you're right, we have to get people on board. Change is not going to come with 7 people.
Yeah,
it's a real significant wave of people, and that will be seen as being a threat to the dominance of Ealing Labour. Thank you so much for coming on board tonight. I really do appreciate you giving up your time and sharing your knowledge and expertise with us. And it's just, I think, a bit disheartening, that this, what is happening in Southall is so familiar, but heartening to hear about the communities that you've talked about taking a stand and actually, having some big wins. So 100%. Thank you very much for coming on the call. You're welcome to stay, but not necessary. It's our usual monthly meeting. I'm going to sort of move on to what we were doing campaigning. And last week we actually met Zach Polanski, who was the deputy leader of the Greens, and Kai Bangbola, who is campaigning for Zane's Law. So just to fill everybody in, Zane was a little boy, his son, and they live in Chertsey, and there was flooding in 2014. There were huge floods across the southeast, and Zane lived in a home that was close to a landfill site, which the parents knew nothing about. It flooded, and hydrogen cyanide was found in Kai's blood and has led to paralysis. Very sadly, Zane actually passed away. But the coroner at the time has determined that carbon monoxide was the cause, not hydrogen cyanide. So it's absolutely shocking that there's this cover-up going on. And Kai is actually campaigning, as I said, for Zane's Law to basically toughen up the Environmental Protection Act 2010 and to bring about the registration of contaminated land by councils, far more rigorous regulation and treatment of contaminated land. So it's a no-brainer for Cash to actually support that particular campaign. So I've written to the leader of Ealing Council, Peter Mason, the MP, Virendra Sharma, and also the MP in the neighbouring area, I've forgotten his name, John McDonnell, because his area is also affected by the contaminated land at a gasworks site. I've also really tried to influence other people who are affected by gasworks sites. And Cash was instrumental in establishing Gasworks Communities United, and it's brought together campaigners from East London, North London, Brighton, and other areas who are very concerned about, usually it's Bartley Group or St William, submitting applications to redevelop gasworks because they've read about what's happened in Southall. They've seen the Guardian film, Is My Neighbourhood Poisoning Me? So I've encouraged them to write to their local politicians to support Zane's law. So yeah, it's quite interesting to feel actually supported by Zach. He reached out to us. He visited last summer. So obviously he's campaigning in the run-up to the GLA and mayoral elections. So I think it was very useful for him to actually do another site visit and for us to make that connection with Kai Bangbola, because, you know, we recognise the similarities in the injustice that has happened to him and, you know, what's happening to families in Southall. We also met Natalie Campbell, and she's running as an independent mayoral candidate. So it was really good to actually meet with her and do a guided tour around the site. And she recognised the similarities with where she lives. I think she lives in Wembley or near Wembley. And I've not been to Wembley for years, but she said, you know, there are developments going up in a row in that area as well. So it was useful to tell her as a community how we are affected by the air pollution, because we still believe the land is contaminated. And I was on the site a few weeks ago and I was being interviewed by trainee journalists. And I kept getting distracted because every so often there were gusts of wind carrying the noxious chemicals in my direction. So, you know, it's a no-brainer to actually try and engage the politicians. It's obviously a hard struggle, but, you know, it's bringing our story to people who are not familiar. And I don't think that does any harm. And I think going back to the Southall Green, the Southall Rec situation, there is kind of like a groundswell of people saying, well, it's not good enough, you know, that people don't feel safe in the local park. So what I'm trying to do is, because obviously this is an important issue, but to try and use that to influence the councillors, the Safer Neighbourhood team and the Safer Communities team from the council to meet with us. Because it's not sort of good enough really that we don't have regular meetings with the council. The ward forums were cancelled, and the Southall Town Forum hasn't actually been established. And, you know, we don't have the opportunity to meet with the councillors because they don't hold surgeries. But I think as long as people are adding to the groundswell of discontentment about the rec, particularly as we're heading towards, you know, late spring, early summer, then I would do my very best to push to have a meeting with, as I said, the police and the Safer Communities team.
Yeah, and shall we just touch on now, obviously we've done safety, can we just touch on the Broadway and about these, well, obviously Eid was 3 weeks ago, what was it, how long ago, 3 weeks ago?
Yeah, about 2 weeks.
Yeah, 3 weeks ago. Obviously every Eid there's the issue of people coming out to the Broadway. It's not an issue, obviously, celebrating. I'm Muslim myself, so I was there. But the fights and the violence. So I saw a number of police officers along the Broadway, and I spoke to them before at about 7 o'clock. I said, have you guys got the team in place? Because there's bound to be a fight tonight. And the police go, everything is under control. We're not closing off the road, as in for cars. I said, but you know by now, the cars are the issue. Because when cars start speeding down the road, then if a pedestrian gets hit, it's an RTA. And by about 10 o'clock, there were a number of crowds in the roads waving different flags. Fights broke out. The police then, obviously I spoke to you about this. The police were then decided to use batons and stuff, and that wasn't the way to deal with it. They could have de-escalated this way before these fights broke out, because they saw tensions rising. So I said to the police, you could have had a public dispersal order in place, or you could have closed off the road from 7 o'clock as I suggested. But then again, people are saying, oh, but they were throwing bin bags at the police. Okay, yes, they were. But why? Because the police decided to get riot shields and the riot police out. And this was not a riot. And this happens every year. And there was one particular Sikh officer under the name of PC Singh, who throughout the night was telling people, this isn't your place to be doing this. And the last night before Eid, I clearly remember this officer, because he did stop me and I was paid to perform outside a particular venue. I'm an entertainer for whoever, some people might not know. So I'm paid to perform at venues and outside venues to bring a crowd in. And he said, oh, do you have a busking license? Which I do have, by the way. And I said, yeah, here they are. They're on my phone. He goes, oh, but have you had permission? I said, I've got the license. I don't need permission. I said, the shopkeepers and the owners of that restaurant over there have paid me to be here. Would you like to see the contracts and the invoices? Anyway, besides the point, this particular police officer then decided to get violent and abusive towards myself on that day. I turned around and said to him, I said, officer, your body cam's not on, number one. So whatever you're saying, whatever you're doing isn't recorded for your safety and for mine. So I suggest you turn on your body cam. The minute I said that, this guy decided to walk away and go and pick on someone else. Now, I have raised a query with the Metropolitan Police about this particular officer, because I feel that this is racially motivated. And this isn't the first time he's done this. He's done this a number of times for the last this time last year on both Eids, he's done this. So I'm just wondering to myself, where are these officers coming from? Because they're not WA officers. No, they are WA officers, but they're not Southall based. They're Ealing based or Uxbridge based. So they don't have the resources, because there's no police station in Southall. So where are these officers?
That's a big loss, actually, not having
and
the police station. But the thing is, the problem I've got is that you've described what went on. Obviously, it's not ideal that some people were not behaving appropriately. But the problem is, it's exploited by the far right, who've called it a riot, when clearly, a few skirmishes are not a riot. You don't see bombed out shops and broken windows and
exactly what we had in 2011 was a riot. Now, I was only 9 years old at the time of that riot, 9 or 10, and I clearly remember seeing the news, and I will never forget that, because my cousins were in Turkey and we're all 1 or 2 years apart. And I called them, I said, I think I'm gonna die. I was only 9 years old. But me and my cousins still talk about this all the time, because it's crazy to think they called that a riot. And I'm like, you had riot shields out, you had armed police out on the streets of Southall. I said, if somebody is delusional enough to then say to a police officer to shoot him, because there are and I say nutcases in Southall, as there are everywhere across Ealing and across London. Somebody tells the police officer to shoot them and the police is not on the right side and they pull that trigger, what the hell are the police going to do? That'll be a massive inquest. Not only that, it'll be a massive, there's no trust. I will say about 70% of the youth in Southall do not trust the police, including myself. I've been stopped 5 or 6 times in the last 2 years. Whenever I'm stopped, I say to the police, why have you stopped me? They said, the question the police ask you is, do you know why you've stopped? Do you know why we've stopped you? Now, a rule of thumb is never answer that, because you could be admitting a crime you've not committed. Yep. So what I say to the police is, why have you stopped me? Because I'm doing nothing wrong. I've been in my work uniform, which is just a shirt with my lanyard on, and I'm like, no, I don't actually. Oh, we believe you're suspected of carrying drugs. Okay, right. What grounds? Okay, brown, Asian male, 5'9". Okay, that's half of Southall. Why are you stopping me? Now, it's like there's no trust with the police, and why I'm mentioning this is because now elections are coming up. The police, the ambulance, the police, the NHS, the LFB, not really the fire, but the main two services, which are the police and the NHS, they're under a lot of pressure again. Oh, you need appointments. You need to get your targets. And I'm like, our targets have always been there. Why are you sending us emails to say make sure you have enough appointments? Or why make sure you've got this in place or that in place? We've got Ealing Council officers coming into clinics to do walkarounds.
Why?
They're not Ealing Council buildings. They are owned by the NHS.
Yeah, but why are they doing that then?
To make sure the buildings are intact, because they're going to be polling stations. And I've always
right, okay.
I say, why is a health center a polling station? Why isn't it?
I didn't know that.
Why isn't
generally speaking, it's kind of like church halls and schools?
Why? Yeah, exactly. Why isn't the town hall being used as a polling station? Why don't we have a hall available to hire, which is going to be supported? But then again, all these questions are raised every year or every 4 years. And the issue we have now is, I've put up a front. I said when I was running for elections, I wasn't allowed into polling stations. I was not allowed near, I was allowed near polling stations, but it was like, but you've got Labour leaflets now in buildings which are meant to be apolitical. So why is that? Because as we said earlier on in the school, money talks and bullshit walks. Because Ealing Council being paid by the Labour Party, or by Ealing Labour rather, which is just from, say, if I've got 2 wallets, I put money out of this wallet into that wallet, because it's the same bundle of cash to me.
You
say, put these leaflets in your buildings, and I'm like, they shouldn't be in here.
The thing is, Ealing Labour do nothing except turn up for photo ops at the Gurdwaras, and do a bit of a walkabout down the Broadway. Now, when we try to engage with them, they are nowhere to be seen. They don't turn up to their advertised surgeries. The ward forums were cancelled. Southall Town Forum, I haven't got a clue. Is it up and running? It doesn't seem that way. But as long as they are confident that they're going to get the vote, then nothing will change. So what we need really are candidates that offer a credible, genuine alternative.
I mean, I think this will be
and for the people, yeah?
Yeah, I think this is the last forum before the vote. I just want to say to everyone who's going to watch this, think before you vote. And I said this 2 years ago when we ran, and a lot of people did think before they vote, but not enough did. And Labour does not represent any one of us in Southall. I feel that there's not a single person, apart from the councillors themselves and their families and their friends, who benefit from them being councillors, or even the MP, or even the mayor of Ealing. Because what have they done for us in the last, say, 2 years since they've been in term? In the last,
if they had interest, they would have supported the case for Southall Rec to be refurbished.
Of course.
Councillor Dinser lives in the ward.
Greenland,
why is he not championing that? It's something that people need. It's pretty grim, really. But hopefully, you know, if there is or are independent candidates standing who have a good manifesto and are credible in how they represent themselves, maybe what happened in Rochdale could happen in Southall.
And the only reason that happened in Rochdale, and it will happen in the West Midlands with Ahmed Yaqub standing, is because, I'll tell you why, it's because there's unity within the community. And that is what was always needed, unity within the community. And I say this because in Southall, we have a divide, not only with politics, with religion, with the caste, with ethnicity, with nationality, and about, it's like, why is there that divide? And it's like, we are all one. If I cut my hand open and you cut your hand open, what color do we bleed? We both bleed red blood. It's not like if Virendra Sharma cuts his hand open and he pulls out gold. No, he takes out red blood. And this is what I say: racism, gentrification, is that what the word is?
Gentrification, yeah.
Sorry. Sacrifice, all these terms which have come about. Why are they there? And it's because people aren't represented and people don't matter to the people in power. Like, there's no, and yes, it's very good to have these meetings, and obviously we've been doing them for close on to 3 years now. It's coming up to 3 years since 2021 we've been holding 2020 actually, haven't we? It's been a,
oh, I can't remember exactly, but yes, it's our chance to
it's been a number of years that,
what we feel, and also to share some of what we've done for the community, such as the work we've done with London Play.
Like, I'm not standing in the elections, and the God honest truth is, a lot of people have emailed me and messaged me on social media, why aren't you standing? You say you're for the community, why aren't you? And the main reason is because I will stand, and this is an oath. If I am still breathing and living in London and in Southall in 4 years' time, I will stand as a candidate for the MP elections when I will be 26 in 4 years' time, because then I feel I've got enough experience. Yes, I've got 6 years of community work I've done, but I still feel I'm too young, and I don't know enough to be an MP. I know enough to be a councillor, I feel, and I will in 2 years when the elections for the councillors are redone. I will be standing as most of the well, it was called the Ealing Independent Network, which no longer exists, but we will stand again under an independent. We will stand independent again, but it will be full. And we are, look, it's not to look. I earn enough money. My other colleagues who ran in the campaigns, they all work and they earn enough money. It's not about money. It's not because you get a council allowance of £12,000. £12,000 doesn't break anyone's bank.
You're doing it for the right reasons, to represent the community, not for self-interest.
Like, we do, like, in openness and on it and transparency, me, Angela, and the rest of the team do not get paid to set up these meetings. It costs us money, in fact, to run a Zoom account and set up these meetings, but we don't make any money from
we're doing it for the good of the community.
And the reason we sit here every month and spend 2 hours of our evenings to raise these concerns us, because we need a voice, and this is why our title is Southall Matters. Why aren't our voices being heard? And that is a question which still hasn't been answered close to 2.5 years on.
Sophie, I want to talk to you, sorry to interrupt, about obviously the Channel 4 series Defiance had a lot of publicity. You know, I watched it. It was promoted on social media, and a young lady held an exhibition connected with the events of 1979, you know, the Southall uprisings, 1979 and 1981. But it was held in the Parkside Yards venue. And I just find it really bizarre. You have these respected campaigners who fought for Southall against the far right in the late 1970s, yet they are sitting in a building owned by a property developer who was oppressing the local community.
Yeah.
And not just Bike Group, but all the other developers who are in town building high rises. And the impact on our community in terms of pollution, noise, and light, and the noxious fumes on the gasworks, and also to experience loss of light because there are developments going up right behind their garden walls. Yeah.
So
Now, what
these,
I don't get is, my view is, and obviously I'm assuming you would agree, racism comes in various guises, yeah, not just the far right marching through town and putting a boot in.
just give me
Why are
2
these
seconds.
campaigners, these activists, not addressing what is happening in 2024 that is oppressing the community and has racism at its root?
Yeah, just give me 1 second because I did actually have something up. So there are, I can come up with, look, racism is not just, oh, your X color or your Y color. That's one form. There are many forms of racism, as we know. We've got through the system, you've got your wealth. You could, discrimination is another form. Discrimination, racism, all interlinks. Now, look, these campaigners, yes, I commend them a lot for doing what they did, for going on the front line in the 70s. Well done to you, all congrats to you for defending your home. But now you're in your 50s and your kids are going through the same thing, or your grandkids even are going through these same things. Where are you? Aren't you going to set an example and say, listen, we went through this in a different form, but this is why I got into this work actually. So why I'm a campaigner, why I'm an activist is because when in 2006, I want to say 2014, yeah, I was in year 8, so it'll be 2014. When I went into that public meeting, I knew nothing what was going on. And I stood there at the age of 13, not a clue in the world in what I was saying. And you can hear it in my voice, actually. And I saw these, they inspired me to speak. And they, look, 10 years on, I'm still doing the work I'm doing. But those same campaigners, when you get to know them, you're like, well, what are you doing now? Because you're all about your past wins. That's very good. Talk about the past because the past makes you who you are. But then what are you doing to keep up your legacy? Because I know when I die, I want to go down in history as a guy who's helped people throughout his life.
I'm not seeing it at all, because I think
but just for, do you know that the first 20 years of my life, oh, I help people. Then for the next 50 or 60 years, I spoke about what I did in the first 20. That don't matter. People forget. And the reason people, like, I don't want to mention names, but we know obviously campaigners in Southall Community Alliance. You've got people in the monitoring group and X, Y, and Z. There's other organizations as well. They come on these podcasts and they come on these Channel 4, Channel 5 series, BBC One, ITV. Oh, I'm X Mister and I've done X for South. Okay, all play to you. But what are you doing now? And when you question them, oh, but that's not my expertise. Sorry, were we experts 10 years ago on what was going on? I certainly can say I wasn't. I was 13 at the time. I'm pretty sure, and you had not as much knowledge as you have now on structural racism or on community development. And we all learn. And we, as a community, we could have helped each other to learn because it's about education.
I think they do know, but they turn a blind eye to it.
They turn the, because do you know
because
why?
Because it was a freebie, and it's far more important for them
because
to look back to the past and what happened.
They're friends. And that is the sad thing. They've got friends within the local council and the local parliamentary groups, i.e. Ealing Labour. You've got friends in Parliament, you've got friends in the council, because you don't want to lose your contract. So you don't want to lose a friend, or you don't want to lose a good contact to get you into certain places. I.e., when you need to get into the House of Parliament, you ring up your best buddy, Virendra Sharma, and you say, "Oh, Mr. Sharma, can you get me in?" Do you know what I mean? And you strut in there and you want to speak your stuff for 2 or 3 minutes, and then you post it all over your social media. "Oh, I was in the House of Parliament today, and I said X, Y, and Z," or "I met Tony Pitchley," or "I met this person," or "I met." Okay, fair play to you, but what are you doing to help your people? Because your people are coming to you. Like myself, I've gone to these.
None, because I think the vast majority of people at the event in the Parkside Yards were out of towners. Maybe they lived in Southall years ago, but they've moved out, you know, to the Shires. And it's just so shocking, I think, just to sit in that building, and I could see across the way the block that's under development. And I feel for the people who have been badly affected on Beakersy Road, and you look into the eyes of people who've lost loved ones.
Yeah, and
Lewis Road as well.
Yeah, but
and I think a person of integrity would say, no way, you know, I'm not going to hold a meeting after all that I've been told about Berkeley Group and how it has treated the community. Any person with a shred of decency would have said to the young woman, this is not the place to hold a meeting, right? I mean, what I was told, Lancaster Estate, their hall was not available. The Dominion Centre was too expensive. That's not good enough. You find somewhere within your budget. If you care about
hold it at a restaurant, your friends own restaurants along the Broadway. Use your network, because as I always say, your network is your net worth. Yeah. There's a saying which I strongly go by, which is your network is your net worth.
Yeah.
And the reason I say that is because if I need to hold an event in a restaurant, I don't own a restaurant, but I've got friends and acquaintances who I know who have access to halls. So I'll call them up and say, "Hi, Mr. X, I need a restaurant, or I need a space to hold a meeting on this date. What's it going to cost me? What, to buy a few plates of samosas or to buy a few dishes?" Okay, but you're happy to go spend money to organize at Parkside Yards, which is, as you said, a site which is killing the very people you're trying to talk to. But
that's the problem. Maybe they're not talking to the community. The people who are there, by and large, don't live in Southall anymore. But my question is, where is your integrity? I remember my late father and his cousin. They used to work in one of the big colonial houses in Jamaica. I think it was Devon House. And this was before independence. So you were under a very stratified society, yeah, with whites at the top, blacks at the bottom. And my father worked in the house. But anyway, it has now become a tourist attraction. And when he was alive, he said, "I am not going to pay to enter a colonial house where I did domestic work." And he was true to his word, never paid to go and see that tourist attraction. So where is the integrity of these people?
Exactly. But I mean, Anja, just going back, I mean, the way forward now, because we obviously can talk about the past, and the way forward is this. Elections are literally less than 2 weeks away. I would plead to everybody on this call and everybody watching this on YouTube and wherever else you might find this, do not vote without thinking 25 times. And I would say that because honestly, have a long, hard look at that ballot paper, because yes, it takes literally 2 seconds to cross that paper. but then you are signing up for another 4 to 5 years worth of misery if you vote these same people in, because we can sit here on calls and complain all we like. Without change, like give the next person a chance to make the change. Yeah, it can make all the, look at George Galloway. Look at that prime example. I think he's done more for Rochdale in the last couple of months than the council did or the previous administration did in 4 years. Yeah, I'll be honest.
Well, give him a chance, you know.
I mean,
and if he doesn't do what the community think he should be doing, he'll be voted out. But I just feel very strongly when it comes to the election, like you've advised, I'll be thinking very carefully. After I saw Sadiq Khan's behaviour at Mayor's Question Time in Ealing Town Hall,
yeah, like, I mean,
I was shocked.
That was another
I was
thing.
really shocked.
So obviously, my talk was all over the place. I looked back at that. Yeah, I was all over the place. But bottom line, I got my message across. And what his response was, I was a right-wing fascist. So I turned around.
COVID denier.
Yeah, I'm a COVID
Flat earther.
Yeah, but I'm fully vaccinated against COVID, and I work for the NHS. The people endorsing the COVID vaccines. Yeah, Sadiq Khan. Like, I don't even think you're vaccinated, mate.
I think you have to listen and engage with people, whether you like their views or not. And I touched upon with you free school meals, and I'm kind of like thinking, well, I've got children. They're not at primary school anymore. They are still legally children, but the free school meals stop at the end of year 6, and we've already identified that there was a cohort of children who got free school meals anyway. So why should people who are affluent and who don't need this helping hand receive financial support? It makes no sense to me whatsoever.
But honestly, Ange, this was another thing. Yeah, the free school meals. Okay, cool. So there might be families out in Southall even who say live in the, and I say the posher bit of Southall, which is, I say, Norwood Green. Do you know, like past about if you're heading
the Minturn estates, where Lord Young wanted it, I don't know, to be gated. He called it a rat run.
I know what
you're talking about.
Cool. So yeah, these people might be able to afford school meals, and they might be only £3 or £4. I don't know, when I was at school, a school meal was about £3.10 for a plate of food and a drink. Yeah. And the thing was, they would, okay, cool, fair enough, whatever. Like God, like, praise to God that, yeah, my family could afford that. But there are people struggling to even feed themselves twice a day in the UK, in London. London cost of living is stupidly high. I've got people who I know who are turning to their GPs for help, for food. And it's quite sad to see, because these people have never asked for help. I personally don't believe in the system of the benefit system, or I don't believe in the system of I believe in a welfare system, yes, for the people who need help, but I personally will never go and ask for help unless I really needed it. And like the people who are now asking for help, they're saying, oh, but you have a job. All right, cool, you only earn £12,000, but you can pay for your own kids' school meals. But then your rent is £1,000. You've got bills going out. You've got no money left for your kids to feed your kids.
Yeah, I'm not talking about that cohort who are not eligible for benefits, but are just over the threshold. I'm talking about people.
But this is what I mean. But it should be a blanket method. And yeah, as you said, look, you go through puberty past primary school. You need food in your system. Your hormones are changing. Yeah, your body is changing. Your body is growing. You need food more than ever when I was 13, I used to eat about 6 meals a day. And I was quite a big kid, but do you know what I mean? But it's like, you have to have food in your system. And it's like, you want to give out these contracts to these private catering companies within high schools. I'm pretty sure it's still the same in FHS, because that's I went to, and in
yeah. Well, that's school meals are a whole different
yeah,
kettle of fish in terms of the nutritional quality.
Yeah, and they want to give you
yeah.
that, and it's all due respect to them. Cool, curries and stuff ain't the healthiest food, but then you promote healthy eating. Okay, cool, fair enough. It's healthy to an extent, because yeah, you've got your protein in there, you've got your carbs, the rice, whatever. But
you've got to cut down on the oil intake.
Yeah, exactly. But that's the whole point. They want to charge you, say, I don't know how much it is, but when at my time it was £3.10 a meal or something. And it's like, where is the help for the parents who can't afford it? They might have a job, but they've also got expenses outside of their kids. They've got rent, they've got bills, they've got a car to run and everything else, have you? So it's like, yeah, Sadiq Khan needs to reevaluate that. And I think we should write a letter to Mr. Khan and say, I think he should and I think we should start a petition to get this up and running. Angela, are you there? I think there's some technical difficulty. Sorry for this, everyone watching on YouTube. Shouldn't be too much longer.
Yeah, Sophie, sorry, I'm back.
I think your camera went off as well.
Yeah, sorry, I switched it off.
Yeah.
I'll take on board all your points, and
Yeah,
I think you've given good advice on really thinking very carefully about where your vote is best.
So and also, yeah, I mean, I don't know if you call it, but I say we start a petition for this free school meals for everyone. I mean, I'm happy to spearhead it, and then if we just share it on social media, and maybe it will get, if we share it wide enough, and I'll use my network to get it circulated as far and wide as we can.
Yeah, I mean, we do need to think about what we are going to be focusing on, and but I hear Simmone loud and clear, and I really thank her for her advice and guidance. We do need more people supporting what we are doing, and she's right. 7 of us on the call, is not going to make a difference. But we are experienced in door knocking. We've done it before. We could do it again, and I think that's something we have to think about. And also bringing people together actually in some in-person meetings.
We'll touch base after the call, maybe tomorrow.
Yeah. I think we need some in-person meetings that
allow
people, because we know digital poverty is a reality in Southall. Let's get some in-person meetings. Yeah, and finding somewhere where we can host. And we'll start small, but we start to grow those.
Yeah.
Anyway, can we close the call for tonight? So it's been great to have Simmone on board. I hope that was useful.
Yeah, so thank you for attending. This has been the April 2024 Southall Matters Community Forum, coming to a close at 8:29. So thank you for attending.
So the next Southall Matters Forum will be after the election. So no doubt we'll discuss the results and what that might mean for us as Londoners. Okay, so thanks for coming along, and see you next month.
Yeah,
okay, bye for now.
Take care, bye.